Issue 245. Uh-oh, the story starts out with Metropolis full of purple goop and people on hazmat suits being there, with Sonic asking what happened here with no hazmat suit on at all. So logically this should poison him, if the people with the ambulances think they need to wear those suits just because they're here, not even rolling around in it. Although, considering what I'm guessing is going to happen in the story from the smear campaign in this ominous beginning, maybe Sonic being poisoned and dying after this would be a blessing. I'd like to point out that for the most part this is quite a light-hearted and charming comic in tone. It's just the karmatic smear campaign against Sonic that's grim, and the God of Death thing. Fortunately, Sonic isn't immediately blamed for the disaster by the cop, as he instead tells Sonic to help up someone who tripped on Mega Mac in his car. It turns out a bomb full of Mega Mac was detonated here a few minutes ago, and the people need treatment within minutes. Sonic creates a whirlwind with a super speed to free the civilian. Then he asks Kintobor if he's up to date on what happened here. Oh, so I guess Kintobor's not mad at him and assuming that the news report from last story was true. Okay, so the previous Sonic story would have felt better if it explained that right away instead of having a restart story. Instead, Kintobor says his sensors picked up what happened here minutes ago, and then Amy reveals there's an incoming communication blocking every TV channel on Mobius. The communication is from a villain saying that Tails, Amy, and Porker have to surrender themselves unarmed and alone on Flicky's Island in 4 hours, or as 19 bombs of Mega Mac will go off. Kintobor says the transmission is coming from Hilltop Zone, and Sonic goes to a place where there seems to be nothing there. Kintobor explains that ever since that Kane documentary aired, zone leaders have been refusing to host sensors for his computer network in their zones, so he doesn't have the resources to be able to search further. That's a realistic consequence of that, paranoia about privacy, but if the way that he had his sensors all over the world was that zone leaders would willingly agree to host his sensors for his computer network in their zones, well, how did he do it when Eggman was running everywhere then? Eggman wouldn't have agreed to having any sensors hosted. I would imagine he would have those sensors from, like, flying invisible security cameras all over the place. Sonic says, well, stop yapping and get working. We don't have time for dumb excuses. Buzz me when you've got something, being totally unfair to Kintobor. And that's when he gets surrounded by electricity. And I guess that's the last thing he ever said to him. As Porker panics from the idea of getting kidnapped like he was by the Metalics again, and Amy worries about how that would affect him if he got kidnapped again, he tries to rush out of the house even though that'll cause bombs to go off because he didn't surrender to the bad guy. That's selfish of him. So he's like being a dirty coward here, because if he runs off, then that'll... Antoine would never do that. And then Sonic shows up at the door and teases Porker about being scared, since Sonic's not supposed to be here right now, and there's really no reason he would be here. The only logical conclusion to make is someone made a perfect robot duplicate of him. You know, like Grimer blatantly made for Metal Sonic to destroy. Not to mention, Grimer made a perfect clone of Sonic once, and it only had a problem where it aged too fast, but he could fix that. But I guess because Grimer's been out of the spotlight in another dimension for so long, nobody's gonna even think of him. After the fake Sonic reassures his friends, with Tails at least looking suspicious, we cut to seconds later where Kintobor is telling Sonic in Hilltop Zone in a panic that the control center was attacked, his friends were hurt, and there's a news broadcast on every channel. Why the fuck didn't we get to see that? Him attacking his friends, instead of seeing panels being wasted on the fake Sonic pretending to have stopped the bad guy. That seems really misaimed and confused. The villain announces that the freedom fighters have surrendered, and if all the zone leaders don't offer unconditional surrender, Green Hill Zone will be the first one attacked, and the story ends with it being revealed that supposedly Sonic is the one threatening everyone and wants to be the new ruler of Mobius, and Sonic's reaction is priceless. Oh, for crying out loud! I hope at least Kintobor doesn't buy this, since he just called Sonic and thought to call him, when I'm sure he would have seen what the fake Sonic did to his friends. Also, you'd think literally everyone would have recognized the villain's voice as Sonic's right away, since he's so well known. Or maybe the voice was being disguised until the big reveal. Either way, it should be obvious to everybody that Sonic wouldn't really be the one guilty here. Someone literally said that they should make Sonic the ruler of the world after Eggman was dethroned. And you know what? This world dictator, greedy person said, "Thanks, but I'm not cut out for a desk job." Did they think he changed his mind? He said that for a reason. He'd be bored with running a country. So it should be obvious to everyone, smear campaign or not, that this is someone trying to frame him. Why wouldn't someone want to do that? They're evil. That's frustrating. They really should be putting a lot more emphasis on the fact that people are hating Sonic easily, not just for having to make a hard decision with time travel, but for being a jerk to his friends. That's the meta reason for Sonic's reputation being ruined. That's the reason this is supposed to be considered karma. So that's what should be focused on. Not people hating him for creating Eggman while not understanding why he did. In the next story, after a text box tries to pretend the God of Death actually did kill Knuckles permanently, Tikal sees the Guardian robots constantly making a beeping, and one of them mentions that they're enacting an emergency program 1, and they refuse to explain anything about it to Tikal, even though I'm sure they could tell her about it while going to enact the program. Then Tikal says, "Huh, water." And since she'd be killed if Vigma found her anyways, she jumps into the water, swims in a pool after the robots, and finds the Guardian Emerald. It's revealed that for 8,000 years there has been a Guardian for the island, and when one dies, he returns here, and the story ends with either Knuckles or another echidna entirely emerging from the Emerald. So is this really Knuckles reincarnated into a different body, like an avatar where it's the same soul for every avatar? I really hope they explain this so that it feels like this still is Knuckles, just with a spiffy new design that they're going to completely forget about the next time we see him. That was a wasted opportunity. Also, I guess the Guardian robots are dicks and decide to erase the memory of the Guardian of when he was just created by the Emerald, so he doesn't remember it. Which is the whole reason Knuckles had such a problem with not knowing where he came from in the first place. Maybe he wouldn't have had a problem if he remembered coming from the Guardian Emerald, because then he'd just assume, "Oh, I was created from that. I don't have any other questions." It's implied that this kind of thing happens all the time, when we were told earlier that Knuckles literally came from the past. So yeah, I guess it has to be an Avatar situation, where he originally was in the past, but got reincarnated. That perfectly explains why the Emeralds were able to keep being guarded for 8,000 years. There really was always a guardian for them, and it's always Knuckles. And to keep him from getting bored and sick of life from always living that whole time, he gets killed and reincarnated as the same person or something periodically, with his memories erased so he's feeling all refreshed. The comic will go to any convoluted length to not have there be a guardian before Knuckles, huh? Because video games! At least when Penders explained it, it made sense that there were other people guarding the Emerald before Knuckles, and they had different designs and personalities, even if they were all serious and duty-focused. This Emerald only trusts Knuckles to guard the Emerald. Why? What's so special about Knuckles other than like, he was the leader of a bunch of warriors in the past? But so what? There'd be hundreds of those, especially in the caveman days. At least that explains how it gets an Echidna Guardian and has always had one long after the Echidnas left for space. I guess this is how I'd imagine the games to have it explained too if they cared enough to do that now. In the next story, we learned from text boxes that it's been 6 months since Shorty and Techno were sent to the frontier town of Solstice from the Ring of Eternity, which is a town with primitive technology. And Shorty has spent his days carving and trading his wares at the weekly harvest to keep getting the money he needs to survive. A text box says that maybe Shorty's always wanted a life free of technology, since he spent so long hating being trapped in his cybernetic armor. And then he comes home to Techno, who's madly written all sorts of mathematical stuff on the walls of their home, with a sentence saying, "I'm not crazy on it." This makes me think yeesh, because I'm immediately imagining Sonic the Hedgehog writing stuff like that on the walls. The implication is that she's not adjusting well to being in a world without technology, with no real use for her. I guess in all the 6 months she was living here, she never had access to enough materials to build an interdimensional transporter to come home. You know, the same one she built to let her and Amy come to find Shortfuse on that spaceship that led them to the Peace Planet. Metals like that would be hard to come by in a desert town like this. And it's not like the world has an advanced transportation system to bring it to her, or the internet to tell her where to find it, and she's not made of money either. The only reason Shorty has any gold and platinum to trade away is probably because he's getting that from his Shortfuse armor. She yells at Shorty to leave her alone because she's trying to calculate a way to find the Ring of Eternity and get her back to Mobius. And then she thinks he's interrupting her, completely desperate to get home. I'm pretty sure I've heard that Techno and Amy become really close friends later in this comic, so I really doubt that she'll always stay like this. She's just stressed out from being arbitrarily stuck here because the sentient Ring of Eternity, remember, decided to stick them here just to be a dick, apparently. Either that or it was taken control of by that villain that had taken control of Scorpion's suit to make him abduct people for a supercomputer, apparently. Or by the villain whose master wanted to consume everything. Either way, they wanted them to come here, so why didn't they immediately go fight them? Why take 6 months to do it? I feel bad for Techno, but as someone who loves psychology, I'm really fascinated by her behavior. Fortunately, Techno apologizes to Shorty for her outburst, twice, and she tells him he's not useless. They hug, and Shorty says that the Regent wants him to do some work for him at his ranch. Techno says that what's left of the gold and platinum is almost gone, and she thinks the greedy Regent will steal it all. Shorty deludes himself into thinking that with the Regent's help, as if he could possibly help him in this backwards world, they'll be back home in no time. At least Shorty reveals in his thoughts that he wants to con the Regent into helping him get home, but this is a world with no technology, so how would he be able to con the Regent into building an interdimensional transporter? That confuses me. He says to the Regent that he has his own supply of gold, and he can get more with the better tools and use of his vehicles to get to where the gold is. Unfortunately, the red guy knows he's lying. He explains that he made contact with an advanced culture with lots of gold, proposing a contest between their lands for the gold, and the plan is to make Shorty battle for his Regent and then they can talk. The red guy reveals that he knows Shorty's from another place because of the advanced writing on his cave wall. He was there? I guess he heard about where he lived. Then Techno was threatened in front of him as a hostage, and it turns out the guy Shorty has to fight with tomorrow is the same shadow-like being that made his armor freeze up. So why did he make it take so long to get another fight with Shorty? Why not just get him straight to him from the Ring of Eternity he somehow took control of? They really should have destroyed it already. The first story and second story are by Ed Reynolds, and as Sonic getting lured away from his base so that a fake Sonic can force his friends to surrender to the villain who's threatening the world with Megamac bombs. Though at least Kintabor seems to get it since he thought to call up Sonic after the fake Sonic arrived. It would have been really cool if the fake Sonic was the evil King Sonic. But we did see him get forced to forever be a Super Sonic that's good, so that wouldn't have really made any sense. I mean, it kind of makes sense that Sonic's friends would buy that Sonic was the one who betrayed them since the fake looks just like him, and Grimer seems to have disappeared, and Sonic's a jerk. But with their experiences with beings like Metamorphia and the Sonic clone, and the Porker infiltrator that looked exactly like Porker on the outside, you'd think their first instinct with their best friend seeming to do this would be going straight into denial, and thinking it's a fake Sonic, instead of immediately assuming the worst in him just like that. I hope they emphasize the fact that it's the bossy, dismissive way he treated his friends all these years that primed them all to assume him turning evil would make sense for his character, for his personality. But by this point I have no faith that this will be focused on like it should be. The second story has it revealed that when Knuckles dies, he gets reincarnated into a Guardian Emerald. Why can't they just call it the Master Emerald? Maybe it's a Master Emerald, since in this continuity there's millions of them in an emerald mine. A lot of fans already assumed that Knuckles was the creation of the Master Emerald to guard it, since there's no echidnas around to create him in the games. So what else could have made him? This certainly makes more sense than having the emeralds on the island be left unguarded for thousands of years, but the Guardian robots took a long time to show up in the comic. They only revealed themselves around the time that Knuckles met Zachary. Why were they hiding from him? What happens if a Guardian dies without the Guardian robots around or functioning to revive him? I'm just glad Knuckles got brought back in just one story instead of dragging his death plot point out pointlessly like Penders did. I doubt the comic would have the guts to pretend this new Guardian isn't going to be treated as Knuckles and actually have Knuckles killed off. They're probably going to have to call him Knuckles for the sake of appeal to the fans. And Mike Corker wrote the third story, which has Shorty as a trader of gold in the primitive dimension he was sent to by the Ring of Eternity, Techno naturally being miserable in that zone after 6 months, And then she gets kidnapped as a hostage so Shorty can agree to get into a fight with the same guy who made his armor freeze up on Mobius. I guess it makes sense that Shorty would adjust to this crazy new zone well. What would make you hate technology more than being trapped in against your will for years on end? But that same technology made him a badass force against villains. You'd think that he would love technology, but I guess it could go either way with him.